Commerce and Megan being the real driver there, Plexus, Olmsted, and Cuyahoga Valley Chamber of Commerce. And we hope that you all engage with us. A huge part of what we do in our chamber work is creating networks and sharing resources. So today, right now, I'm going to take a moment just to introduce our panelists and moderator. I'd like to first start with Janice Contreras. She serves as the Executive Director of Northeast Ohio Hispanic Center for Economic Development, or the Center. Under her leadership, Janice is responsible for the Northeast Ohio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Small Business Development Center. She's a driving force around the neighborhood and redevelopment efforts in the Cleveland's Clark Fulton neighborhood known as La Villa Hispana. La Villa Hispana is a cultural and economic placemaking initiative in the most densely populated Hispanic enclave in the state of Ohio, not just here in Northeast Ohio, but in the state of Ohio. Prior to her current role as executive director, Janice owned and operated her own public health consulting firm, the Innovar Group, and also worked for the Collaborative Research, which administers federal grants through Health and Resources Services Administration. Janice earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from Capital University and an Executive Master of Business Administration from the Ohio State University, OH, Fisher College of Business. She serves on the board for the Center for Community Solutions and is a member of the City of Cleveland's Planning Commission's Near West Design Review Committee. Janice is also a part of the steering committee of the Cleveland Innovation Project and is a member of the Cuyahoga County Citizens on Equity. In 2020, she joined Cleveland State University Foundation Board of Directors. She was awarded the 2018 YWCA Woman of Achievement and was the 2017 Ohio Latino Affairs Commission's Distinguished Hispanic Ohioman. She's an advocate in addressing racial diversity and representation of people of color. Janice was born in Puerto Rico, is bilingual, bicultural, and is proud of her heritage. She is a mother of 2 young adults, Carl and Kyle, and continues to ensure growth in economic and community development for the Latinx community in Northeast Ohio. A really important part of reading these bios is hopefully you're seeing other connection points where there's additional resources and points where maybe you can connect with our panelists today. Maggie Rivera serves as Hispanic Military and Veteran Segmentation Strategy Manager, leading the company-wide strategy and operation efforts for U.S. Bank. Previously, Maggie was Vice President and Business Banking Development Consultant with the responsibilities for sourcing new opportunities, managing COI relationships, loan structuring, business development. Although all the ways that we get paid and we move this money around, I really appreciate Maggie being a part of it. Before joining U.S. Bank, Maggie worked in diversity and inclusion at PNC Bank, where she oversaw programming such as the Mentorship Program, HACR Alumni, Corporate-Wide History and Heritage Month programming, and the Employee Business Resource Groups. She has been in the financial services industry for 20 years with experience ranging from retail, business banking, community development banking, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. She currently serves as the president of the board of directors for an organization we just heard a lot about, the Hispanic Business Economic Development Center. So really nice partnership here. The vice president of New Sunrise Properties and program committee chair for CHN Housing Partners. In addition to leadership roles, Maggie also serves on the Cleveland Federal Reserve CRA Roundtable, the Hispanic Roundtable, Elyria Sunrise Rotary Club, Lorain County United Way, and multiple earned income tax coalitions throughout Northern Ohio. Maggie's married with 2 beautiful children, Bryce, who's 15, and Alicia, who is 5. And we might get a guest appearance because Alicia is hanging out before she gets to go on to her day for daycare. All right, and to bring us in, I have the distinct pleasure of our moderator, the person that's going to bring this all together today, and that's Dr. Magda Gomez. She serves as Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Cuyahoga Community College, Tri-C, where she works on multiple initiatives related to diversity, equity, and inclusion awareness and education. Her work as a special focus on valuing students and employees by encouraging mutual respect and honoring the unique perspectives each person brings to the table and to the spaces that we're in. In addition to supporting employees at the college through professional development and the employee resource group engagement, Dr. Gomez leads the Advancing Women in Equity and Inclusion Task Force, co-leads the Stand for Racial Justice Alliance, and leads the Buenos Vidas Cleveland. I need to practice, all of which are college-sponsored initiatives. But also, this is the thing. We don't always say things right. We have to learn, and that's what we're here to do today. So I'm just going to model a little bit of that humility for you all, the cultural humility. Magda is a board member of the Hispanic Roundtable of Cleveland, serves on the Cleveland Clinic Avon Board of Trustees, and is a member of the Equity Leadership Council for United Way of Greater Cleveland. She holds a Doctor of Education in Higher Education Leadership from the National American University, a Master of Science in Social Administration degree from Case Western Reserve University, and a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Communications from John Carroll University. And before I turn this over to our distinguished panelist and moderator, a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording. Please stay on mute, and so that we can give our full attention to our panelists today. And with that, Magda, I'm turning that over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan, for that wonderful introduction, and Amanda, I'm so sorry, and Megan as well for helping to coordinate this wonderful event. And to all of our sponsors, thank you so much for making this opportunity available to all of you, to all of the chamber members and our community members that are present today. It's so important for us to learn about how to do business with different diverse communities, right? It's important in terms of building our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals for our businesses, and just overall, becoming educated on how wonderful and diverse community we have here in the greater Cleveland region. So first and foremost, I just wanted to put it out there. We are here to talk about the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, however we choose to refer to our community. I say that, and I thank Amanda for mentioning those three terms, because generationally, we each perhaps identify a different way. I know the Latinx is a term that we are getting used to, and it certainly represents being more gender inclusive, which is really great, and we welcome that. I do also, in that vein, want to mention too that let's all also remember that the Latinx, Hispanic, Latino community is represented by so many different countries. We have over 20 plus represented countries that identify in this category, and understand too that we are not a monolith, right? Just like a lot of other cultures, we are individuals, and we all just sort of we might vote a little bit differently. We might worship differently. We might even raise our children a little bit differently. Additionally, too, and interestingly, and I like to always say this, is that in our community, we have first, second, third generation Latinos. We don't all speak Spanish. We may share some similar cultural values and the way we go through this world. And so you'll learn a little bit about that. So moving forward, I'd just like to introduce once again Maggie Rivera and Janice Contreras are my wonderful colleagues who will be having a dialogue with me this morning. And I will kick it off with inviting Maggie to offer us a wonderful presentation on the trends that we have in our in the US as it pertains to Latinos in the market. So Maggie.
Thank you, Magda. Give me 1 second while I get this pulled up, and I'm going to apologize in advance for completely nerding out here. So bear with me. Can you guys see the screen here? Is it the right presenter screen?
Yep, looks good.
Great. So just going to take a few minutes to kind of set the stage here, and don't you worry, this whole thing will not be a PowerPoint presentation, I promise. But I thought it was important to share this because people are often surprised when I share how big of a role the Hispanic segment is currently playing within the United States and how it relates to the economy, to population growth, to the workforce. So I kind of wanted just to share some of that information to get started. Hispanic population growth is extremely significant, and in the past 10 years, Hispanics alone have made up 52% of all of the US population growth, and they already make up the largest multicultural segment within the US today. About 60 million, give or take, Americans trace their heritage to Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America and Spain. And that equates to approximately about 18.5% of the US population, or nearly 1 in 5 Americans as we speak. Now, Hispanics are also America's youngest demographic, with 61% of Hispanics being younger than the age of 35. And that's, comparative to about 40% of the non-Hispanic demographic. So Gen Z, as we know it, is going to be the most diverse generation that the US has ever seen in history. It is projected by 2060, as you can see in the slide I'm sharing here, that this segment is going to account for, give or take, 27.5%, trailing only behind the non-Hispanic white segment. So what does that mean, right? So think about this. Why is that important to your business? And we're going to get into that a little bit. So first off, let's start talking about the labor force growth, right? And it really cannot be overstated. According to the Federal Reserve economist, the number of people retiring in the US is currently increasing substantially, right? I think by 2022, there's going to be close to 350,000 non-Latino baby boomers retiring each month. Now, this dangerous shortage of workers it's really a huge crisis that threatens the country's ability to maintain even the most modest economic growth. Now, fortunately, right, we got the Latinos or Hispanic or however Latinx community ready and willing to aid the U.S. from this demographic time bomb, adding substantial numbers to the critical category of the working age. And it's also important to note that despite only being 18.3% of that population now, 78% of the growth of the U.S. labor force, remember 61% are under that age of 35, is going to be making up that labor force, 78%. So when we think about, and I'm sure many of you on the call have heard the term, the workforce of tomorrow, it really is today. It's happening now. Speaking of those young Latinos, right, from 2010 to 2018, the growth in the number of people with bachelor's degrees, are about 2.6 times, growing, 2.6 times more rapid than non-Latinos. So this younger, more educated demographic supplements more years of effective buying power for companies. It's creating, obviously, with the increased educational values, we're having increased salaries, and they're also going to be making the largest segments of the workforce. So, as you can see, the United States as a whole is going to continue to have this increasing Latino identity as we continue to move on through the next few years. Now, when we think about the GDP of this segment, the total economic output for Latinos in the U.S. was 2.6 trillion in 2018, and that has been steadily rising since 2010. If the Latinos in the U.S. were its own country, they actually produce, just the Latinos in the U.S., a larger GDP than the entire country of Italy, Brazil, and Southern Korea. Now, and while that's impressive as enough, I think what's even more noteworthy is the growth rate. Among the world's 10 largest GDPs in 2018, the Latino GDP was the single fastest growing. So you can see in the chart on the right, you have China, India, then you have the US Latinos, and 2 more down, we have the US as a total. Well, actually, in 2018, the GDP grew for the Latino segment 21% faster than India's and 30% faster than China's. So over that entire period, the Latino GDP was the 3rd fastest growing, and it's continued to trend that way. If anyone is a nerd like me and you'd like to learn more about this, you can I do have the sites sorted, but you can get all of this really from the Center of Economic Research or from various chambers and Federal Reserve. So, I think about all the money that's coming through and how it's impacting different segments. And we're seeing this, through all different sorts of consumership. The dramatic increase is really driven by large gains in personal income that, again, naturally flows from the Latinos' rapid gains in educational attainment and strong labor force participation. And they're really spending money where that matters. And I'm using home ownership as an example because over the past decade, the Hispanic segment, and this is throughout the entire U.S., accounted for 51.6% of the overall U.S. net home ownership growth within the United States, whereas the non-Hispanic or white homer contributed 1.5% to the overall growth. So we are seeing tremendous value add as it's coming down to the economy. And I think it's important to also note that an increasing share of Hispanic home buyers, these are coming from US born Hispanics, considering that 94.3% of Latinos under the age of 18 are native born here in the US, this shift in market share is just really going to continue to increase. So I know it's really early and I dropped probably way too many numbers on you, but just kind of, wanted to kind of set the stage as we continue our dialogue today is, as you think about your own business, a few things to really think about, right? Is your current workforce that you have right now, are they reflecting the workforce of tomorrow, really today, right? Do you have a marketing strategy to really tap into this market? There's a lot of money to be made here, and are you ready for it? Do you have the relationships established with the right organizations within the community? Or, if your business touch multiple states, right? Are you connected with those stakeholders that can really help you develop those relationships? Supplier diversity. We are seeing more and more organizations only want to partner with organizations that have diverse suppliers. And so is this an area that you've spent time to think about, right? How are you supporting that in your suppliers? Are you strategically aligning any of your corporate responsibilities or corporate give or philanthropy efforts to support these segments, right? That goes a long way in establishing and developing those relationships. And so it's something to think about there. And then this is one of my favorite. If someone that did not speak English called your business today, would you be able to serve them? Do you have an adequate amount of folks on staff that can help support this segment? We do have, and especially within this region, a lot of, Hispanics that do speak English, but it may not be the primary language. And I'm going to use the mortgage, for example. Buying a house is probably one of the scariest things someone does in their lifetime, right? I think I've seen some realtors on this call, and it can be pretty complicated. Well, if you add a language barrier on top of that, just imagine that experience. So it could be pretty tough. Is your business environment welcoming and inclusive? And have you thought about your own bias? What about the biases of your workforce? Because we all have them, right? And so, have you had that conversation with your teams, with your staff? Courageous conversations often is the doorway to finding out where those gaps are in your organization and where to start. So again, I'm so sorry for dropping so much first thing in the morning in terms of data, but I figured it'd be a great way to get things started.
Yes, thank you so much, Maggie. That is a lot of information, but certainly just remember you'll have an access to the PowerPoint too, for you to be able to refer to it later. And thank you for putting together that list of questions. It's just an amazing way for us to look at our businesses in terms of what are the recommended strategies from, granted, you post them as questions, but it's a good way for us to look in the mirror and say, what are we doing? How could we be doing better? Excuse me for one moment. Mm-hmm. So once again, thanks, Maggie, for that. And as we consider all of the data that you provided in terms of paying attention to the Latino market and the GDP, why do you think, Maggie, explain, excuse me, why our businesses need to be paying attention to the Latino market? Just elaborate a little bit more, because I do know that you sort of covered that. Yeah, well, I mean, within any segment, right, it's really important to be inclusive and pay attention to all segments, right? You're in business to make money at the end of the day, right? And how can you do that if you're not paying attention to what's happening in your surroundings, what's happening within the market, what's happening in the trends and in your community? Specifically with this segment, it really is. I think there's a lot of maybe biases, right, or opinions that are formed based on, especially within this region, how the Hispanic community, what their strength is in terms of consumer buying power. And a lot of that has to go along with the evolution that individuals have had in getting here, such as my family. We got here in the 1940s from Puerto Rico over here to the States. My grandfather, my grandmother had 12 kids. He worked at the steel mills.
after he passed away, she was there by herself supporting 12 children. So economically, they just didn't have that buying power. And we've seen those generations start to build off each other, where the older kids had to drop out of high school maybe to take care of their siblings or go to work right away. And then they found themselves caring for their parents that had no retirement, and then themselves, and then their children. So they're stuck in this place. But now we have these third generations that are coming up, and they're getting those degrees and they're making those moves. And so now we have real buying power. And so there's a lot of the intergenerational experience, and people just don't realize, like, whoa, this segment's coming up. They're moving fast and unapologetically, right? And then they're really going after these opportunities. And so I think that just understanding that and understanding how your business can not only support but capitalize on this advancement, because we're seeing this first generation all really blowing up in this area. And Janice, I know that I'm going to kind of kick it over to you, because I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this, especially with the work that you're doing over HBC, and it being so close to a lot of these businesses.
Yeah, good morning, buenos dias, everyone. A pleasure to be with you. So just, a little bit on just the business side. There's over 16,000 Latino businesses in the state of Ohio alone. I think one of the things to a lot of Maggie's data and just to note is, when you think of the Latino community, just think growth, just in about every area, to Maggie's point on how just generationally we've just continued to grow, while others, have stayed flat or just have minimal progress. The Latino community just continues to blow it out the park in just about every category: home ownership, business acquisition, just about any source. So as you're thinking about bringing it home to your business or your community, know that we're definitely a community to take note of, and to pay attention to as you create your strategies for your businesses. We're also a huge employer, so that's also important, that not just being employees, but also being employers. That those 16,000 Latino small businesses in the state of Ohio account for $528 million in payroll. So it is significant. The state of Ohio continues to lose population. The Latino community continues to grow. So again, keep that in mind as you're thinking about today's conversations. We definitely have a ton of challenges, right? It's not all that, but we continue to conquer and grow as a community, specifically in the small business realm. The largest market segmentation of or industry that we are representative is construction. About 18% of construction firms are Latino versus 12% for others. So very important growth there. And then obviously we have a lot of service-based industry. So just a little information more so as it relates to small businesses in Ohio, but just significant growth in that aspect. So.
Thank you so much, Janice and Maggie. So Janice, since I have your attention here, can you talk a little bit more about our cultural values and what small businesses need to really be paying attention when it comes down to conducting business with our community? When we think about our family, when we think about, Maggie mentioned earlier, language barriers, things like that. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. Well, relationships matter. And I know we say that in business pretty broadly and commonly, but for the Latino community, that's kind of where it starts and it ends. Very family oriented. We do everything by connection. We do everything by word of mouth, very old school, I guess we could say, and how we connect and how we make decisions, right? How we make purchasing decisions. How do we make decisions about how our kids go, what doctor the kids are going to go to see, or what schools, what neighborhoods. And so it matters to have kind of that connection with the community, because otherwise, there's a trust factor, right? And oftentimes you might be dealing with folks that are newcomers into Ohio or into our neighborhoods that may not have that. And so that's kind of how we have this density in the near west side of Cleveland, is because that's where resources are. That's where you had a relative when you decided to move in, and then there little by little you spread out. So really building those relationships relationships are very important to our community, and the value that we place on family, the closeness. One thing that COVID is killing with the Latino community is we love to hug, we kiss, we're very affectionate in that sense, right? Very typical, even for our Chamber of Commerce, to have a networking event and you see people hugging, and it's just very typical. So some of those things, I know sometimes if you're not used to it, it could kind of catch you off guard. Sometimes you get people that give the awkward kind of hug because they don't understand that that's kind of how we relate. But it's just very common because it's just that whole familiarity, right? And so if I'm doing business with you, you're part of my family. I have let you in, because it does require a level of trust. A lot of just cold engagement of just sending, cold calls or emails or doesn't work. Like, it won't work. Latinos, again, you need to have a reference, they'll be naturally suspicious. And just really, it's not always about, you don't need to know every cultural nuance, right? We are complicated just like any other culture and any other dynamic. And unless you grew up around it or really have that understanding, there never is that expectation that you fully need to understand, but definitely come as your authentic self of wanting to understand and engage. And we're very open, we're going to want to feed you. We're going to want to take care of you. We'll invite you, to our kids' baby showers. Again, so there's this level of familiarity that also reflects in doing business. It's not just about networking or social circles or where we go for, our faith-based, but it reflects in business transactions as well. And so it's really important to understand that as you're approaching a Latino market or really looking to penetrate into a Latino segmentation.
Thank you so
I
much.
just want to piggyback off of Janice's real quick. I mean, that was beautifully said. But just one other thing to know about the Hispanic segment, it's very, very common to have multi-general households as well, right? So you'll have the abuela, you'll have the parents, you'll have the children, you might even have the great big grandchildren. And so when you develop that relationship, you're really developing a sustainability pipeline for your customer segments as well. Because, as Janice said, you're going to go and you're going to ask your tia, your uncle, and being authentic and developing that relationship, that is going to give you a rate of return that's going to continue on through generations. So just one last thing I wanted to mention.
Absolutely, Maggie. Thanks for saying that. Because at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's being authentic. It's also creating that sense of belonging and that welcoming and inclusive environment for the community, not unlike other cultures, right? So how could we be more mindful and more intentional with as small businesses in terms of serving our customers and clients? Just elaborate a little bit more on that topic. What are some strategies?
Yeah, so I'll start there. One of them is not making assumptions, right? Maggie talked about like us recognizing our own like internal biases about a certain group. And, these are hard conversations to have, right? Around, checking ourselves. It's very easy for people to say, oh, I'm not racist, or I don't have prejudice, or I love everybody, right? We all love to say that because we want to feel good about ourselves. And, we probably, kind of sort of mean it. But there are things that sometimes we're not aware that shows up or shows out in a certain way. And not only our personal self, but we have employees, right? And so we might not be that person in our establishment or in our business that's interacting with our customers initially. So just recognizing everything from your first interaction, whether it's a phone call, whether a person is walking into your establishment, on how you feel, we pay attention, and as a person of color, you don't have a choice, right? Because folks are always going to look at you differently if you're walking into an establishment that maybe is not used to being frequented by a person of color, or just those initial interactions go a long way on understanding that and making sure that your staff is very well braced on your own business culture of how you want every customer to feel when they come in, regardless of their color, their gender, their whatever they might be wearing. And really understanding, hey, we treat everybody with respect. We recognize everybody, may have the ability to pay. I was sharing when we were preparing with the ladies, an experience I had at a hot tub, fair, where it was just obvious they were not interested in selling me a hot tub because of their own biases, right? Whereas all the other clients had a salesperson. And so I walked around and I tried to engage, and there was no engagement because, you know, they made some assumptions about my ability to pay possibly, or my background, or what I was even doing there. So it's not just ourselves again, but it's also our teams. So we have to be really, really aware of those experiences. Secret shop yourself, right? Have someone call in, have folks visit your establishment so that you are making sure that you are being really culturally appropriate and sensitive to what matches your business. Maggie showed in her tables, you know, it's not ability to pay. We are not all, janitors or construction workers. We are, a community that's very well educated, that has resources, that is investing. And I think it's a detriment sometimes not to recognize the size and the scale and the impact that the Latino community is making here in Ohio and throughout the country as a whole.
Thank you for saying that, Janice. And thank you for sharing that example as well of you going into that store. I think a lot of us experience these microaggressions sometimes because, once again, people, and oftentimes it's not that they mean to be harmful or offensive. It's often what they don't know, and their social determinants that they experience during the growing, their backgrounds and what they're maybe not used to. I've had the occasion which I've been asked in a store about my heritage, and then being told, "Oh, you're so articulate." Well, what does that even mean? I am Hispanic. I do speak English. Okay, I'm American. Don't assume that every Latino sounds a certain way. I can't harp on that enough. And it's important as businesses, no matter how large or small your business, try to help support your employees through professional development as it pertains to learning diversity and inclusion topics, learning how to mitigate bias. This is very essential when you're thinking about how to prepare your workforce to do business in the community and even within your work environment. That's so critical. That sense of belonging has got to take place within and with your business dealings with what you're doing. And since I'm talking about doing business with other folks, well, actually, no, I want to touch upon the workforce. So when we think about diversifying our workforce, because I get questions about that all the time, people wanting, to get folks to join their boards, people wanting, they want to diversify. They want to know how to get Latinos on their boards. They want to know how to hire more Latinos. How could folks be intentional about recruiting and hiring Latinos in our community? Talk about that.
Yes, I can jump in here. And I want to start off by saying, after what happened to George Floyd last year, I think that a lot of people started to really look at this. I know there was a couple months where every month a new organization asked me to join their board. I said, "Hey, I'm already at capacity." No, but there's more people out there, right? And I'm really glad to see that folks. It is really starting to gain attention. But throughout my conversations, I know that I have heard a lot of headwinds that organizations have been having trying to identify folks. And so a couple of things that you can do, strategies for, I would say starts off with your recruitment. I would look at your recruitment practices. If I have any football fans out here, the NFL actually came out with a new policy back in the early 2000s called the Rooney Rule, where they had every team with a head coach vacancy, they had to interview at least one or more diverse candidates. And that was part of, their strategy for recruiting. Excuse me, my little one just woke up. So, mommy's on a call.
I'm hungry. I'm hungry.
Okay, honey. You want to see her on camera? Look. So, sorry. I told you you're going to have a surprise visitor. So, when we think about those recruiting practices, do you have a diverse slate of candidates? That is one way to try to increase your diversity. And there is actually research that was done by the Harvard Business Review that found out that if you have one candidate, let's say it's a minority candidate or woman candidate for a specific position, statistically, they virtually have no chance of being hired. Now, if you have at least two candidates, whether they're female or minority, in the candidate pool, the odds of hiring a female or diverse candidate is 79 times greater. And if you had more than 2, it goes to 195 times greater. So, start with your HR policies. If you're looking to find diverse candidates, that's a great place to start. Also, think about where you're looking to find candidates and where you're sourcing them. Again, it's all about relationships. Community organizations are huge. Call Janice. They know plenty of folks. There's tons of organizations out there that to develop relationships with. I work at a big bank with about 74,000 employees, and in the banking industry, they're one to be known that are not as diverse, right? It's something that I've been dealing with for 20 years, and we have those conversations. Why are we going to the top 10 schools that lack diversity? We need to look at other schools that have great talent, that have high diversity, and it's going to increase the recruitment we can get from our interns, things of that nature. And then also think about filling positions that are skill-based and not degree-based. Let's be honest. This kid already knows how to use YouTube. She's going to be working Word by the time she's 7. You don't need a degree no more to learn how to use a lot of that software. It really is inherently, adopted throughout life experience. And so there's a lot of positions that I think individuals or hiring managers want someone to quickly plug and play because it's the fastest thing to do, but you're really alienated tremendous amount of talent when doing that. So, and then the final part is, again, just activating this public-private partnerships. I would say, and finding a pipeline is not enough. If I started a job at XYZ company and I don't see anyone that looks like me in leadership and I don't see anyone that represents me, do I really think I'm going to have an opportunity to grow my career there? Likely not, right? And so when we think about retention, what are you doing to support this segment, right? To be inclusive, to create that culture where that can be bred, right? And whether that looks like a workforce development program, internal leadership pipeline program, think about things that you can do within the organization that's going to help retain and promote those folks. Again, we said it earlier, 78%. That's a huge perception of the workforce. So once the baby boomers start retiring, what you gonna do, right? We need to really, really start thinking about that.
Thanks so much, Heidi. And thank you, Alicia, for joining us this morning.
Say good morning, my bedhead.
Yeah, definitely Alicia's, we're gonna be looking at her in our future soon. So I'm glad you mentioned universities and colleges. I have to put a shout out in and thank you, Heidi, for mentioning Tri-C's 10,000 small businesses. We do also, I do want to make mention too that we have an awesome career services department college-wide on all 4 of our campuses, helping to support and place our students, giving them, resources and tools, building resume building workshops, helping them to interview effectively, all of those things. And we, of course, have a diverse student population. So consider that when you're thinking about hiring and finding interns for your businesses as well. Janice, you want to share some information about that category that we were mentioning?
Sure. Just to reiterate, this pandemic has also just created a different phenomenon around workforce, right? And so things are shifting very quickly, and it's becoming a challenge to find, folks that are willing and able and show up every day and do some basic soft skills around work placement. And so a lot of the traditional ways that we have acquired employees are no longer working, right? Putting a posting up and just expecting masses of people to respond. I don't know if you guys are having better luck. We have a few positions open and we're struggling to get the right kinds of, candidates or even get candidates to reply, honestly. So I think it's going to be really, really imperative for small businesses to get creative, tap into their networks, and build those partnerships that Maggie was talking about to really be able to have the adequate staff that's going to help our businesses grow and scale. We're also seeing more competitive wages because there is a shortage of workforce. So small businesses are limited on what we can do, but it doesn't mean we can't be creative on things that we could offer. And one of those is going to be that cultural sensitivity. recruiting a Latino employee is only step one. The part of retention, we can't reiterate that enough, and making sure that your workforce environment is one where folks want to stay and want to continue to come back, and understanding a lot of these cultural nuances that we're discussing this morning is going to be important. And you know what, when you don't know, ask. Again, I said we're a community that likes to share. So definitely talk about this, talk about the celebrations that we have with our families, and talk about those experiences, because we're also always willing to like share. And you could just see when we start talking about family, we just glow. Oh my God, my family's crazy. We do this and we do that. And you know what I mean? So I think those are things that help employees feel welcomed and feel like they matter, because you're even interested in learning more about what's going on. But, you know, small businesses, we need to pivot and we need to shift very quickly, and really being able to retain the workforce that's coming up, and that honestly is just really limited right now.
Yeah, Denise, and I like, whenever we talk about forming employee resource groups, I think that's a really important diversity and inclusion strategy at your place of business. If you have the opportunity, it doesn't really cost a whole lot for you to create opportunities for your employees to join employee resource groups. It's a great way to have folks come together to build that sense of camaraderie. And, when you have shared identities with folks that you could share, any concerns you might have, but certainly even from a social aspect, that's just a great opportunity for folks to feel inclusion within your organization. I want to talk about, since we did mention diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, how about building specific measurable goals? Like, what should that look like for small businesses as they're looking to include and, increase, I should say, diverse workforces, as well as doing businesses in the community with vendors and suppliers?
Yeah, this is an excellent question, and it's going to look different. It's going to look different, based on your business. I think before you start setting those metrics, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what's your company's self-identity, right? What is your current demographics, so your gender, your ethnicity, your sexual orientations, things of that within the organization, and understand exactly where you're at. And gain an in-depth understanding of what your current diversity initiatives and strengths and weaknesses are, right? Are you reflecting the community? Do you have proper representation? Is your leadership really well-rounded in order to have, diverse thoughts, right? Diverse ideas coming through and able to connect with different segments? And then get a pulse for what resources your employees need, right? You mentioned employee business resource groups. Is it professional development? Is it the switch in some of your HR policies? But, and then it's also, I would say, start with leadership. We see this over and over again, where you'll see an organization that has their box of what executive presence is, or their box of this is the culture within this community. And you see a lot of businesses, they'll hire for diversity and manage to a simulation, right? So maybe I use my hands too much when I'm talking. Maybe I'm not leadership material then within that organization, right? So it's having that, defining what that executive presence is, right? In a multicultural scenario, right? Not just, this is what I'm used to, and this is my leadership, and this is the way my team's going to be, right? And I think it's very important. Janice, I know you had a story about someone who was interviewing for a position at an organization. Maybe you can share that here in a second, because that's a perfect example about, are you really hiring for that diversity, or are you hiring to fill a role and check a box? And so when we think about, sorry, I'm going back to Janice's story, but when we think about, ways to get started, there really is no shortage of information available out there, in terms of metrics. So you can certainly start with the easy stuff with, okay, let's see how we are in terms of our demographics, but it doesn't need to be that big. When you're starting DEI practices within an organization, look at the actions, right? It's, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So maybe it's, let's start up a BRG and see what we're getting in terms of engagement. So that could be one metric. Or let's see how we're doing in terms of our increased recruiting. Have we increased our people of color 10% over year? Or whatever that metric may be. It doesn't have to be, this is the end goal, let's hit it. So I would take some time to look at the behaviors and move it one day at a time. I will tell you that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a journey. There's never a destination. It is 100% a journey, and you can't just hire the right people and expect the culture just to work. there is various nuances that need to be considered when you're growing and you're going through that journey. And you know, being a DEI practitioner, we're always talking about where we're at in that journey and what's the next level. You know, so we'll even spend some time. Okay, we look at the journey as these 5 steps. What's step number 6 look like? How do we know when we get there? And it's creating a culture where not just you as the owner is responsible for that. The role of diversity, equity, inclusion is every single employee's job. You know, that's the work that everybody has to do within an organization, and that's the culture that needs to be adopted. I know working, you know, at US Bank, we got 74,000 employees, and oftentimes people look at us like, hey, what are we doing now? It's like, you tell me, right? This really is everyone, all hands on deck type of work in order for it to work, for culture to change. So I would say start with your leadership, start with a self-evaluation, you know, have a hard look in the mirror, and then identify where do you want to be, and then just start biting it one bite at a time.
I love that, Maggie. Everything you said was just on point. I also want to add, when you're considering, you know, your entire organization and building goals for your organization, why not build it into the performance management? So, you know, create a goal for your employees to make, you know, to learn, if anything, maybe even a team effort and an individual basis, arm them with the tools necessary, obviously, and support them throughout the journey. As you said, Megan, Maggie, it's definitely a journey. It's not a one and done. It's just ongoing. You've got to keep going. And you know, look at our environment that we're in. It's continually changing, and we need to be prepared, right, to be inclusive and to be welcoming and to have those diverse strategies in place. Janice, did you want to add anything about building diversity goals?
So definitely just being very mindful of, you know, 2020 and kind of 2020 phenomenons, right? We're in the midst of a pandemic. We have the killing of George Floyd and how that has risen the profile and the conversations that we're having around diversity, equity, and inclusion more than ever, right? We're talking about this, which is a great positive effect that we're even having these conversations, that the chambers felt like these conversations are significant enough to create programming around it. I think diversity, I feel like we get it, right? You know, you hire a Black person, a white person, a woman, a veteran, an LGBT, we have diversity, but we can't just stop there, right? That's not enough. Okay, you have diversity, so what? What are you gonna do next, right? We talked a lot about inclusion, about people feeling welcomed, about really making sure that you have that engagement, understanding what our differences are and what our similarities, because most of the time you're gonna find those, right? A lot of these nuances are not exclusive to just the Latino community. We share them, you know, across different diverse groups. And then we get to the issue of equity and what does equity really mean? Early on, issues around affirmative action caught a really bad reputation because it became, you know, to some places a check the box. So I have to do this because the law says I have to do this, right? Now it's different. Now it's the right thing to do. We recognize it's the right thing to do when we're giving folks an even playing field to even compete, which oftentimes is not the reality. It's not a handout. It's really giving people the opportunity to compete. The example that Maggie was referring to, I had a meeting last week with a large, you know, company, insurance company, and it was with a Latina, and we were talking about an internship program, right? Internship program with high school students get to come in the summer and get equitable skills, and they had a student from St. Ignatius High School, and they had a student from my alma mater, Lincoln West High School. And obviously, the student from Ignatius was more articulate, presented better, was white, and did better in the interview. And so the student from Lincoln West High School did not interview as well. They were shy, they were quiet. It was a Latino person, which sometimes for us, that's a sign of respect. It's not a sign that we don't know how to speak or can't be articulate. But there's just this level of respect in our culture that's very important. When I was a little girl and my mom was yelling at me, I needed to put my head down. It was a sign of respect that I wasn't challenging her, right? So sometimes there's nuances like that we don't understand. The company chose the kid from St. Ignatius. The kid from St. Ignatius would have probably gotten an internship somewhere else. He was already groomed to do well. He was going to do excellent. That internship would have meant more for the student from Lincoln West High School that would have had that opportunity to excel. So what mattered there? Did it matter who interviewed best, or did it matter how significant this experience was going to be for that intern, because it was an internship program? So I think sometimes those are the considerations that we need to make on what is our criteria and how are we leading with diversity, inclusion, and equity to make some of those tough decisions. Sometimes it's not necessarily who interviews best, who you need in your company. It's a level of loyalty, exposure, bringing someone up, right? Through the ranks. I know I got a lot of opportunities early on and am where I am because of that, because somebody took a chance, because somebody gave me an opportunity to grow and develop. And honestly, that's really how I grew professionally in this community. And so we need to do more of that.
Thanks so much, Janice. That's an excellent example. Something to consider too when building our criteria for hiring, and thinking about that example that Janice gave. I know there was a question that came in through the chat that pertained to, and Amanda, could you please read it off for us? Because it had to
Absolutely. I was just about to jump in. So the question here is, at what point, sorry, we have two different questions. One moment here. The first one was, how do the initiatives of a 7,000 plus employee, how do the initiatives of a corporate organization, how can we translate those to our small business or even a mid-size company and organization? And then the next question, I'll put that out there too, but I'll repeat it as well. Actually, let's take that question first, because this next one's kind of like layered. So how do we translate these corporate ideas and approaches for inclusion into mid to smaller size organizations?
Yeah. I'm going to start by saying, don't make the assumption these are not corporate. I'm not a corporate person, right? I work with small businesses every day. So to Maggie's point earlier, you got to make it what it means for you, right? How does that translate into the size of your organization? You could be a 5-employee company. You could be a 50-employee company. What do those goals mean to you? Maybe you don't, you have a small team and you don't have the opportunity to hire and create that diversity within your hiring process because you're a small shop, but you buy things. You purchase, you procure, you have vendors. So translate it into whatever that means for your community, and you're definitely selling something, right? So who are you selling to? And is the Latino market a market that you should pay attention to, and for what reason? So again, creating these programs are very unique and very personal to your organization within the opportunities that you can include some of these metrics and some of these goals in developing your plan.
Yeah, it could be something as simple. I'm sorry, Maggie. I mean, I was just thinking that it could be something as simple as understanding what are those social media platforms that you could be tapping into. There are an abundance of platforms that even I work with on a daily basis to share information and resources about jobs, about anything that essentially markets to the Latino community. I know earlier when Amanda introduced me, she mentioned Bienvenidos a Cleveland. There's a group there. There's all sorts of, there's Comunidad Latina Cleveland. Those are just examples of ways in which we can promote our businesses too. Maggie, did you want to say something about?
Yeah, just another small example, right? So in large organizations, you can do employee business resource group, right? You have tons of employees to pull from. But if you're a small organization, let's say with 5 employees, you don't have that option. So this is an opportunity to get innovative as an organization. So maybe you make that part of your business strategy that each quarter you're going to spend a day exploring a different culture, or visiting different businesses for lunch in Spanish community or Lebanon community or Black community. So there's ways you can still make it happen and take these ideas and relate it to your own business. You got to get a little creative sometimes, and that's what makes it more fun. You can have a group within your organization create this multicultural business resource group, right? That does an event or does just a fun fact every month, and just an opportunity to help your workforce grow and expand and learn.
Thanks, Maggie. I also want to interject too with the fact that Tri-C offers to the Stand for Racial Justice Alliance. We have a dedicated website with a playbook that anyone could utilize. It's there for our community to utilize, with suggested calls to action, suggested organizations you could be partnering with, suggested readings, films, books, documentaries, even classes that are offered at Tri-C that address topics of race and social justice. So utilize that for your business too, and to support your employees. That's what it's there for.
Right. Yeah, so thank you both for everybody for identifying the ways that we can celebrate culture and build awareness even in our small organizations. And so it is about knowing where and who and showing up in our communities. And especially as the pandemic lifts a bit, we can show up in person, but also going to events on Zoom and networking and leaning in and listening and connecting. We have to, I often say as white people, we have to go and show up in the communities that maybe we're not a part of. And same thing within the LGBTQ community. We need our straight allies to show up and engage with us. So thank you for sharing that. We'll grab those resources, and I believe that we can email that out to our registration list so that you can have them all there, because people did ask about social media platforms and these different resources. The second question is a hiring question. So it sounds as if the person asking this question is a number of times trying to fill an open role that's more reflective of the community in which they are serving, in which they are trying to engage, support, grow. And it sounds as if they're having a hard time finding a hire based on merit. And so how long do you keep that position open? When you aren't successful filling it? I think this is also kind of about pipeline development. Like you have to have a diverse pipeline and candidate pool in order to fill those interviews. So this is a hiring question. It sounds like it's about pipeline. It's about how long do you leave that open? What are other ways that you balance merit and skills with the fit of the organization and ensuring that you're being reflective?
So the first thing I'm gonna say is it's kind of hard to like figure out what have you tried, right? So some of it is how are you trying to recruit this person? I know one of the pet peeves for us three ladies, I will tell you right now, is like, oh, we try to hire somebody and we just can't find them. Well, where are you looking? First, no judgment on the question, but where are you looking and how intentional have you been to really trying to identify how you recruit a Latino individual or, you know, a person with any level of diversity. So I think we mentioned some things before, networking. So your Latino chambers, there's 5 Hispanic chambers of commerce in the state of Ohio. We are just the Northeast. There are organizations that are focused on workforce development, El Barrio through the Center for Families and Children and the Spanish American Committee. There's other Latino-based organizations that could serve as a referral or a resource to post your information and share it. There's the social media network platforms that you've tried. And a lot of these things that I'm sharing with you don't cost, right? There is no necessarily an additional cost. You know, we post positions on Indeed and we have to pay for those. And we, you know what I mean? So, and understanding that there's a challenge altogether. Another, you know, and I'm gonna let Maggie go here, but comment that she made earlier was really looking also on what do you mean by merit and what do you mean about qualifications? And is there something there that is becoming a barrier? The way job descriptions are written sometimes it may not attract the candidate that you're looking for. And is that really what's necessary? I think job descriptions have become a little outdated in the way that we're communicating, and sometimes could be a barrier of somebody even wanting to apply or not. So even looking at our own internal systems and how we're trying to be attractive to diverse individuals.
Janice, you're spot on, right? And I was thinking that too, you know, merit, skill, and capacity and capability are very different things, right? And I want to say this all goes back to relationship. I remember when I was managing branches back in the day and I had open positions, I would throw something on Facebook and you wouldn't believe the basura that I got, right? So, you know, I mean, I just got folks that just, you know, yeah, they were great people, but no, right? I needed quality individuals. They didn't necessarily have to have a degree, but they had to have the skill set, the capabilities to do the role. And that's where it goes down to the relationships. You know, if you don't have, you know, whether it's the Black community, the Spanish community, the LGBTQ community, there's relationships, you should be able just to go and say, hey, we're looking for some folks. Who would you put your name behind? So that would be one thing is, you know, start developing those relationships. I think I saw somebody said, you know, open posting is not enough. And that is also spot on, right? It's where to go. And as Janice said and alluded to, where can you find good talent, right? That is going to do the job and do the job well, that you can rely on. And another idea is too, is if this is uncharted territory for you and you're trying to figure out how to get from that A to B, you know, think about those roles, hire on trial basis. You know, you're on a 2-week probation. You're not going to cut it out. You know, that's a way to give them that opportunity or any variation of that works for you and your business. So do that while something like that while you're building up your relationships and your pipelines for that talent. I hope that answers the question. I know that it probably goes a lot deeper than we're able to put in the question. I'm sure there's more nuances involved in that. And I'd be more than happy to help if you want to connect offline.
I think Patrick Shepard raised his hand.
Didn't even know we had the raise the hand function here, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi there. I'm sorry, that was a mistake, but I'm enjoying the conversation and thanks for all your work.
Hi, Patrick.
Hello, everybody.
It looks like you answered the question, and we have Nicole, who really leveraged the chat to say, hey, we're looking for somebody. So it looks like Nicole has an offering that's in there. And I just did a real quick grab from LinkedIn about 5 simple steps for creating more inclusive, about what your must-haves are, paying attention to language that's biased around gender or problematic in its terms, and then also pay attention to our jargon. Like, is it necessary to use the jargon of our sector? Because could that be off-putting and just allow somebody to make a move from maybe a different sector? So I dropped that link in there as well.
Yeah, and I think we need to develop a list, Maggie and Janice, the 3 of us maybe put our heads together, because, and Janice, you did mention a few organizations that folks could tap into. We do have an abundance of opportunities for folks to access jobs in our community, and most certainly those are the places that we want to direct you to as well. I also want to give a shout out and plug to our friend Marcia Moreno, who recently created a wonderful list of the 100 Latinos you need to know, right? I mean, and obviously a lot of these folks I would assume are mostly employed, but I mean, who isn't looking for advancement? So we can certainly share a link to that list as well. Happy to do so.
Yeah, I shared Marcia's link earlier. I wouldn't be doing my job as a chamber representative if I didn't promote my chamber members. But yeah, Marcia is also an expert in Latino workforce recruitment and retention. She's a consultant that often is brought on to help organizations understand the cultural nuances. Every time I listen to her presentation, one, I laugh because there are things that you don't realize you do as a Latino, but you do and matter when you're talking to others. And 2, just an excellent resource that she's created with 100 Latinos to know, and providing those resources. So trying to find them, I'm saying, oh, we can't find them. Well, Marcia has 100 for you. So you could start there.
And one last one, we cannot go on without failing to mention, is the Young Latino Network. Huge organization of just some young, brilliant talent. And if you're looking for someone that can grow with your organization, this is a great group to tap. So I'll try to find the link and post that as well here in a moment.
I'll put it up.
Gracias.
Yeah, and don't forget, Esperanza, supports so many up and coming young folks that you could establish a pipeline within your organization, just giving them an opportunity to intern at your business. That's a great way to get to know them, help to support them in their growth. And also, who knows, you might have a gem that you could hire full time.
Yeah, and they also help post-graduation with job placement and so forth. So Esperanza is also a great resource. For those of you that might not know, Esperanza is a scholarship program for high school students, but they do tutoring and a lot of other placement in our community. I'll put their link up there as well. It's hard to talk and Google at the same time.
Well, you're doing it well. Your face doesn't give it away that you're thinking. This is a skill that you should definitely put on your resume. It's good.
Amanda, were there any other questions in the chat that we missed?
No, you all answered every single one, and we have some really good resources here. Thank you for dropping in the chat. It makes it a little bit easier with our follow-up.
Great. So this has been a wonderful opportunity to be able to share a lot of the information that we can offer to you. I'm sure we could talk, on and on about these things, but, again, we will provide you with the PowerPoint with the resources that we just mentioned. And if you have any questions, that you want to share after today, most certainly, if you could send those over to Amanda or Megan, and we'll be happy to try and get those responses for you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's certainly been an honor for us.
Great. Well, I'm going to close things out for us today. I want to give a huge thanks to our panelists, to Janice and to Maggie, and to our moderator, Dr. Gomez, for participating with us today. I think this was stellar information, highly valuable, whether you're a team of 1, a team of 1,000. There were definitely some translatable pieces of information and resources that can work for you and your business, regardless of what size you are, what your team looks like. So thanks to all of you wonderful ladies for participating today and for sharing all that information. We will send a follow-up email to everybody who registered, so you have those links, those resources, and you can feel free to reach out to myself or to Amanda at Plexus with any questions, and we'd be happy to get those to any of our panelists or our moderator today to get you any additional resources that you might need. We want to thank Baldwin Wallace again for being our presenting sponsor of this series. And I want to remind everybody that this is just the first of our 5-part series. So we will have another session 2 weeks from this week, and we're going to continue with those every 2 weeks through July 8th. So we have some other panels speaking about different communities such as the African American community, the LGBT community, immigrant community, as well as people with disabilities. And all of those are going to be a similar discussion on how you can be thinking about working with those communities, both internally as your vendors and suppliers and as your customers and clients, and how you can be mindful and thinking about ways to best interact with and be supportive of those communities in your business operations. So please make sure to join us. You guys, if you're registered for today, you'll be getting the information for all of those follow-up sessions. So keep an eye on your inbox. And again, thank you so much to our panelists. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. And thanks to Baldwin Wallace, our sponsor. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thanks again.
Everyone, thank you.